Good morning, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about recommendation letters and how to get them and why they're important for your college applications. So you may be wondering why some of your colleges are requiring you to send recommendation letters as part of your application. And the reason for that is because your recommendation letters that you might receive from a teacher, counselor, coach, or anyone else adds depth to your application and allows the admissions counselor who's reading your application to get a better understanding of who you are. The big benefit is that it is a different perspective on who you are. So in addition to the information that you put into your application yourself, all this other information from any of these recommenders is also going to be accounted for in the application. And having all of these different perspectives can be helpful so long as you ask the right people for your recommendation letter. I've got a few tips for you on how you can get the right person to write your recommendation letter, and also just a couple pointers on how the best way to go about doing that is. So you may have seen in the title right below here, this video is called Asking for Recommendation Letter. My first tip for you is you actually have to ask the teacher or counselor or whomever to write your recommendation letter. You can't just show up and say, "Here, write this letter for me, I need to have this by tomorrow." You have to go in ahead of time, ask if they will be willing to write a letter of recommendation for you, and then after you've asked them, that is when you can send them the invite on the Common App or include them in any other part of your application process. So not only do you actually have to ask the teacher or whomever it is that's writing, you have to know who's the right person to ask. Different colleges may vary in what sort of rec letters they require. Some of them may want one from a counselor and one from a teacher. Some of them just might say we want a rec letter in general. So take a look, first of all, at what sort of requirements that your colleges have in terms of rec letters. And once you've figured out what your college requires in terms of rec letters, then you can figure out who you need to ask. Whoever you decide to ask, though, you need to make sure that someone who actually knows you. It shouldn't be the teacher you've only had for 2 weeks or a teacher you've never had before. It should be someone that you have a good relationship with in the classroom and that they can understand who you are academically and even as a person. It can be very hard for a teacher to write a recommendation letter for a student that they don't really know anything about. So try and find a teacher that you have an existing relationship with. You might also want to consider your grade in the class. If you really like the teacher but you're not doing so well in the class, that might show up in the letter where the teacher may say, "I really enjoy the student, they're a very good person, but their grades are a little on the iffy side." And it is well within a teacher's right to say that. So keep that in mind when you are thinking about who you want to ask. If you're failing a class, I would recommend not getting that teacher to write your recommendation letter. My third tip for you is that you should give your teacher, at least what we call at my school, a brag sheet. And you can see one right here. There's also going to be a link down below where you can check out and download your own brag sheet to give to your teachers. So you can see on this brag sheet that it talks a lot about who you are, kind of gives some characteristics for the teacher to reference during your letter, and then also talks about some of your involvement in sports and activities, what classes you've taken, if you do any volunteer work, and it also gives them an indication of where they should be sending the letter to. Having one of these brag sheets will make your recommender's life so much easier because they can reference this instead of having to email you to figure out what the information is that they need. So if you really want to impress your teachers and get a good letter, give them one of these when you ask, and you will be golden. Another important thing to do is to give your teacher or recommender some sort of deadline for when you'd like the letter by. You should never go into a teacher and say, "Hey, can you write this letter and have it for me by tomorrow?" Your teachers and counselors and whoever else you might ask are very busy people. If you want this letter done, you're going to have to ask in advance, so plan ahead with whomever you're going to ask. Give them kind of a deadline of when you would like to have the letter submitted by. That might be when you're submitting your application, so you can say, "I'm going to ask you for this letter, and I'm going to be submitting my application at the end of this month, so if you could have it done before then, that'd be really great." If you can give them that sort of information, everyone's lives will be a lot happier. Remember, if your teacher's happy, you're happy. Lastly, you want to be sure that your teacher knows where they're supposed to submit their letter. Whether that means submitting it online through a Common App or other online application, or whether they're supposed to send it through the mail. Some of your schools might even have it that your recommender should be giving the letter to the guidance office to send out with other information from your school. Check in with your guidance counselor if you're not sure if that's how you're supposed to do it, but you always want to be sure that your teacher or recommender knows where they're supposed to be submitting their letter to. As always, don't forget that you can email me at pagoestocollege@gmail.com with any questions that you might have, and I'll be happy to answer them for you. And if you want one of those brag sheets that you can find here-ish, there's a link down below where you can download your own copy of that and give it to your teachers. Alright everyone, I'll see you next week.